Afternoon. I love hearing all the voices in the room. This is why we do days like this, so that you're all talking to each other. So it's great to see. I hope you're making some new connections. I hope your mornings were thought-provoking and empowering. We really wanted to start the day with this idea, with equipping you with tools to help create the world you want to see. And now we want to shift gears to discuss how you can fortify yourself to continue to support the transformation that you look to see in the world. I'm pleased to introduce you to Dr. Courtney McClooney, the founder and CEO of Equawell Partners, a consulting firm reimagining how we work to sustain ourselves through leveraging rest and recovery strategies. Dr. Courtney combines her organizational behavior and social science research with somatic wellness training to deliver impactful solutions for individuals and organizations. An award-winning educator, researcher, consultant, and social scientist, Dr. Courtney has received several grants in recognition for her work on racial equity and inclusion, including groundbreaking research on the emotional tax and racial code switching in the workplace. Her work is featured in several peer academic journals, and she is a contributing editor to Forbes and Harvard Business Review. Dr. Courtney was a tenure-track faculty member at Cornell University, completed a postdoctoral fellowship in the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia, and earned her PhD in psychology at the University of Michigan and a BA in psychology and interpersonal organizational communications at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She is a former research fellow at Catalyst Inc. and previously served as an AmeriCorps Social Impact Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Courtney.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, and I am so glad to be here at the new Impact HQ, fueled by NSG Summit. I recently learned that new title today. But I'm excited to help to bring your summit to a more restful space as we engage in this next portion of the conversation. And that really is what today is going to be. I'm not going to be lecturing at you. There'll be a lot of interactive elements, and I'd love to hear your voices. So get ready to participate at the level that invites you to learn. So not necessarily in your comfort zone or your discomfort zone, but right at the edge is where most learning tends to happen. But we're here today to talk about the joy of rest and recovery. I realized that I left that part off of my title, but it is just as important to think about rest and recovery as separate, interrelated strategies, and how we can experience true joy and pleasure and things that will help us feel more alive. And those are the components that together will help sustain yourselves and the nonprofit ecosystem. But before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on in the world right now. Regardless of where you are in the world or what's specifically going on in your world, there's a lot of change happening daily. So there's a lot of things that are also taking your attention and might be top of mind right now. So what I'd like to do in the time we have together is really create space for you to be present with yourself, with this conversation. And to do that, we're going to do several different activities. The first of which is listen to music. Music actually has a lot of really strong effects on our brains and how we can relax and absorb information. Who in here has ever heard of the group called Beautiful Chorus? Yes, I get to share something new. Beautiful Chorus is this quartet, I believe, of women who have this beautiful melodic voices, and they usually sing mantras over and over again to some really soothing beats. So we're going to listen to one today called Be Here Now, and it's all about being present now in the current moment. So Nigel, if you will, let's listen to Beautiful Chorus. Awesome. Thank you. And I hope that helps you to kind of make your transition from anything else that could be distracting you in the moment to being present with yourself today. And it's going to get even more awkward from there, so get ready. All right. All right. So we're going to start by talking about the obvious elements of the sector where there's a lot of burnouts and for so many different reasons. So we want to talk about why that is and how things like rest and recovery can become your go-to strategies. Well, that will start with reframing rest as an actual sustainability strategy and talking about the significance of developing recovery practices. I encourage you to have something to write with if you don't already, because you will want to take a lot of notes on how you can bring this information back to your organizations or even put into practice for yourself. So please do get out something to write with if you don't have it already. And then after we think about how important rest is for ourselves and for our teams and how to integrate recovery more seamlessly into our everyday work life, we'll start talking about how that can create this collective power of joy and how joy can become something that's more than a momentary feeling, but actually a culture and state of mind that everyone experiences when they interact with your organizations. And together at your tables, you will start to put into practice a lot of what we discussed here today and reimagine what the system can look like when things like joy, rest, and recovery are at the center. So if you're not sitting with other people, I encourage you to make friends and go sit next to someone else. And I also encourage you to really make this session your own. So of course, I have things here that I want to share with you and strategies and tools, but you really have to create your own learning experience here. So this is something that I would do with my students often, which is asking them to set an intention for their experience today. And that intention can be anything from, I want to learn at least one strategy that I'm going to put in practice for myself, or I want to get to know someone who I haven't had a chance to talk to today. So I'll give you about 30 seconds or so to write down an intention you have for your experience. My intention, for example, is to try to share as much information as I can in as few words as possible, because I want to hear mostly from you. That's going to be really hard for me if you know me. Would anyone like to share the intention that they have for their experience today? I'm a teacher too, so I'm used to cold calling. Although I can't see your names, I will describe what you're wearing probably. Now everyone's trying to avoid eye contact. Yes, thank you.
So I vacillated the whole week before coming here because I feel all the data that I've taken in the last year, just exhausted from it. And I was like, I don't need another whole new day of data that I'm going to feel responsible for. But in the end, I knew this was the right thing to do. And so I tried to, my intention is that whole van of I'm coming, but I'm limiting pressuring myself of what I have to absorb.
Oh, very nice. We're going to talk a lot about boundaries and capacity today. So that is wonderful. Thank you so much. Maybe let's hear one more. Thank you. Yes, please.
So for me, I wrote down my intention as making meaningful connections with you all here.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So first interactive portion of the day, I will just ask you in the room to raise your hands. So the question that I had up here was asking, how often do you feel that you have nothing left to give, that you are utterly exhausted and have reached the end of your rope? How many of you have ever felt that way? Ever. How many of you have felt that way this week? Okay, a little bit fewer. Good. How many of you have felt that way today? All right, that's okay. This happens often, especially because we live and work in a society that has normalized things like burnouts. 57% of US workers report experiencing work-related burnout on a regular basis. This used to be one of the lowest levels of work-related stress that we could find up until about 2021. And then it spiked and has never gone down. And you can imagine this is the highest in the helping professions, including in the nonprofit sector. Anyone have an idea why? Why is burnout so high in this sector? Yes, please. Yes, the definition of burnout is when your demands exceed your resources. And most nonprofits are even celebrated or recognized for how well they're able to accomplish so much while dealing with so little. It's called the overhead myth. Anyone ever heard of the overhead myth? Oh, yes. Can you share more about the overhead myth? I see you nodding your head vigorously. Yeah.
The idea, I mean, I haven't heard it by that name, but
Yeah.
the idea that the value or efficiency of that organization is determined by how little they spend on quote-unquote overhead materials.
Exactly. And who's included in that overhead? It's usually you all, the people that's actually fueling the nonprofit sector. And so in a separate survey that came out, I think in around 2023, 68% of nonprofit leaders said they're very concerned about burnout, but they also mentioned that their top challenges had to do with their staff, how to hire, how to retain, and how to staff people. So let's think about this. Burnout is really high because there's an expectation that you can do more with less. And the nonprofit leaders are concerned about this, but they're also concerned about hiring and staffing and retention. What's going on there? Why does there seem to be somewhat of a disconnect? So the question I have for you is, how are you addressing burnouts and hiring, staffing related issues in your organizations? Are you addressing these things? Or are you just seeing it as normal? Of course, people came into this field for passion, not for resources. Of course, people can do things more with less because that's what we always do. To what extent have you all normalized burnout as part of your everyday work culture? Any reactions to that? Yes.
So one of the things we're doing to try to combat it is to eliminate. Hi. Hello?
Yeah. Thank you.
Alyssa Burke from Starbridge. One of the things that we're trying to do to eliminate it is to get rid of using the words like work-life balance, because there is never a balance. And that we're trying to be transparent and honest with the fact that it's like a work-life integration, and trying to find a way to integrate those pieces so that people's needs are met both in the workforce as well as respecting the fact that they need to be met outside of work as well.
Interesting. Love to hear another. Here.
Should I just talk really loud?
I think Katie's going to make her way to you. I was hoping to see a mic close by, but I didn't see one.
The other one. You're going to get some exercise in.
I'm Pam Keffey from Journey's End Refugee Services in Buffalo and Rochester. We need to increase pay. Like that's a big goal of mine, not to accept the fact that because we work in nonprofits, the staff can't be paid a reasonable wage. So trying to figure that out.
Thank you. Oh, we have one more. Yes, please.
This kind of just goes along with what Pam said. It's not just we don't have the funding to hire staff, and we can barely pay ourselves. So both myself and the other executive director, we have to have other jobs in addition to running a nonprofit in order to sustain our nonprofit and our own families.
Wow. Yeah. Anyone else? There's so many parts of. Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
I was just going to say this year we're having a holiday party where we have already barred any work topics. So we're just going to hang out, eat, play, and celebrate together.
Thank you so much. So what I'm hearing, I'm going to combine the things that there are very real needs that people have around funding and money. And if we can't pay ourselves or pay our staff well, then it's really hard to even think about things like burnout because we don't even have the resources to meet the most basic demands. In order to do that, we have to be transparent and honest about what we're really expecting from people, and also recognize that there's a whole life that exists beyond work that include things like play and joy. So these are really tough challenges, and I hate to say it, but you're not going to get all your answers here today. We only have 90 minutes. But what we will do is think about how to increase that resource side of the demand equation. The demands are there, but we can start to think about them differently if we think about our resources differently, especially when we think about our resources as things like rest and recovery and joy. So first, let's spend some time reframing what rest is. This is how my organization defines rest. It's actually resisting the pressure to perform labor. So not just not working or not doing anything, but resisting the pressure. And it's freeing your mind, body, and soul from this transactional exchange of my labor and worth have to come after exceeding amounts of effort. That there is a supremacy idea that the best people deserve rest because they've earned it just because of how they were born and what family they were born into. But it's actually rejecting all of that and choosing to slow down anyway. I have 10 deadlines this Friday, and I'm gonna take a nap. That's an example of rest, right? Where I'm resisting that pressure to do work. I also really draw on the philosophy of Tricia Hershey of the Nap Ministry, and she defines rest as a portal for dreams and reimagining another way of being. That it's actually quite hard to think of how we can get ourselves out of this trap of having not enough funding, too many demands, not enough resources, if we're too exhausted. Like we can actually reimagine another way if we take a step back and go to sleep and let our dreams help us figure out a better strategy and way of existing. So we're gonna create a visual here on how we think about the ways that rest can sustain us and become a sustainability strategy. Here is one of my favorite definitions of sustainability. It's quite basic and can transfer across a lot of different realms. Sustainability is ultimately when you are responsibly stewarding resources. So that's the first part. You're responsibly stewarding the resources you have for two reasons: to both generate and maintain life now and in the future. So a lot of times people think sustainability is only a future-focused initiative, but we actually need to sustain ourselves right now. And we're gonna talk about the different ways that rest helps us sustain ourselves. So I gave you all an email a few weeks ago talking about 7 different types of rest, and they're listed here. Can someone give me an example of one of these types of rest that they either themselves are experienced or aspire to experience one day? We've locked eyes, so now I'm gonna pick on you. Oh yeah. So pick one of the forms of rest and share an example for me, please. Thank you.
I think sensory rest is one that I always kind of focus on, just a time when you can sort of turn your brain off and not be taking in a lot of new things. And for me, when the weather's nice, that's fishing. You know, I go out and it's quiet and I'm in nature, and if I catch a fish, that's cool. And if not, I got to enjoy a nice day and, you know, hear the birds and stuff. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So sensory rest, disconnecting from overstimulating things like this phone that's burning a hole in my pocket because I haven't picked it up in 2 seconds. Yes, sensory rest. What's another one? Yes, please.
So creative rest for me is I like to sew.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allows me to disconnect, but I'm using my brain in different ways to, you know, figure out problems, and it actually helps me to even figure out solutions to things related to work.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you so much. So we have creative and sensory. Yes. Oh, here, yeah.
Social rest. I like to spend time with my kids. I know they can be burdensome, but normally I know we have kids here, but they are actually some of the people who keep me my calmest state because they see when I'm overwhelmed, so they know like it's okay. So they are my social rest.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you. No pressure this side of the room, but that side's rocking it. So. We have 4 more. All right, we have 2. We'll come to you next.
Hi, it's Melinda DuBois from Mental Health Advocates in Buffalo. I do this, I do a lot of yoga. I do this yoga practice called Yoga Nidra. I don't know if everybody has heard Yoga Nidra, but it's like the deepest relaxation you've ever been in your whole life. And it's for the class that I take, it's about an hour and a half long, resting. You're not sleeping, but you're in deep, deep relaxation, and it's brilliant. It's so rejuvenating. And like they say that an hour of Yoga Nidra is like 3 hours of sleep.
Very nice. Yes, that's a great example of physical rest. That's more than just sleeping, but fully relaxing your body. Very nice. We have one here.
Well, I was going to do physical rest, but that's fine. I'm not sure what this would go under because I feel like it covers a lot of those things, but I do a lot of travel, and that's very rejuvenating for me, even though I'm one of those crazy people that like to do like 25,000 steps in a day on my trips.
Oh.
But the idea of being kind of in a different place and being able to experience a different culture is really exciting to me. I don't know what that would go under, though.
Sounds like mental rest to me, where you're allowing your body to do the thinking for you and experience different things. So we have emotional and spiritual left. Emotional rest. What do people think that is? Emotional rest, yes.
I feel emotional rest can be like leaning on your friends and your family, your support system to kind of vent, talk about things, and get things off your chest.
Very nice. Thank you. Last one, spiritual rest. Yes, please.
Spiritually rest. I'm actually a person who does a lot of work in my church setting. Like, I serve a lot, but the music part of it always feels very rejuvenating and restful to me. And so I try to make sure that I don't opt out for preparation during that time and stay fully present in that space or carry that over into parts of my day that I'm not with my community of believers. So
very nice. Thank you so much. So I appreciate you all for painting the picture of what these different forms of rest look like. And when I thought about the benefits of having these different types of rest and how it could sustain us, this was some of the lists I generated. Physical rest is literally necessary for your body to function. Anyone in here ever tried to function without sleep for an extended period of time? My baby's 16 months old. I will not go back there. But earlier in her life, there were weeks where there's no sleep happening. My cells aren't regenerating, so my skin looks horrible, but my body also just wasn't functioning as it should. So basic bodily functioning requires things like physical rest. Having creative rest, creating something from scratch or doing something for pure pleasure, it helps you appreciate both what currently is and what you're able to do. Social rest teaches us boundaries. You start to identify, this is the person I want to be next to when I want to feel energized and go out. This is the person who I want to be next to when I need a chill night in. You start to learn those boundaries around your relationships. When you have emotional rest, things like talking to a therapist or trusted family member, it helps you be able to communicate your capacity needs. I need this right now in order to be well. So it helps you communicate and understand what you actually have capacity to do. Spiritual rest can help us think about our connections to things that are bigger than ourselves and also imagine what could be possible for myself. So I am a believer of the Christian faith, but regardless of whether you have a faith-based belief or not, being able to have a type of spiritual rest, something that connects you to something bigger, it helps you imagine things beyond what you currently see. Sensory rest can, of course, ground you in the present, as he mentioned, like listening to birds, paying attention to things in nature that you may not before. And mental rest provides more clarity. So you're actually able to think clearer and make better decisions when you give yourself mental rest. So combining all these things, I thought, how might having a body that can function, having appreciation for what is, having clarity, understanding capacity, communicating boundaries, how can that help us with sustainability? Or help us think about sustainability in a more tangible way. And this is the definition I came up with, but you might come up with something that's more specific to you. But what I saw these different forms of rest doing is actually create space and clarity for us to make decisions about what it is that we're doing and how we're allocating our resources. But we don't just think about those resources in terms of I only have this, but we actually have a more extended or expansive mindset. We think from an abundance place as opposed to a scarcity place. Because after you feel well rested, you're actually looking at the world in a very different way. You're no longer looking at things from a place of exhaustion, but actually from a place of holistic, restful minds. And so that helps us think about what needs do I need to address now versus what can wait until later. What's actually urgent versus what's emergent? Which one should we pay more attention to? Because a rested state helps us understand what I have capacity for and what I don't have capacity for. And I think in the nonprofit sector, this is one of the most challenging but important things, is to learn what do I actually have capacity to do and what do I not have capacity to do. So I asked you all this question on LinkedIn. This is one of the questions we posed prior to the summit. It says, what's the primary barrier to you experiencing rest at work? And most of you said it's the inability to resolve all the issues that are present. And I thought that's a perfect answer. Not perfect because it's horrible, but it helps us understand a couple things. One is that we are finite beings. We're not supposed to resolve all the issues all the time. We can't save everyone and everything. If we could, we wouldn't need things like rest. But because we need to rest, we actually can get even more clarity on what it is that we can do with the resources that we have. So when you put rest at the center of your strategy, what becomes your priority as an organization? Is it meeting the funder's goals? Is it metrics only? Or is it things like, my staff love working here. We are able to retain people longer than we ever have been because they feel well rested, because they feel like we care about them. What becomes your new priorities? Another question to think about, who do you notice as collaborators as opposed to just people that you're serving? How does your relationship with the people around you or even the different funding groups around you change? Are you only in competition with other organizations that exist, or are you actually collaborators trying to solve the same problem? So imagine yourselves, you have two different nonprofits, they're both focused on youth development, they're in the same city, there's only a separate pot of money that they can apply for. But what if we apply for it together? What if we combine our staff resources? And all of a sudden, now we have the money to pay our staff because we're not just looking at our own resources, but we're expanding it and thinking about others, right? It's a different mindset shift when you put rest at the center. And this is my last question that I want you all to actually spend time thinking about. How does acknowledging you cannot do it all shift what it is that you actually do? Because who in here knows that you actually can't do it all? I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. You can't. You literally can't do it all. So how does that shift what you actually do? When you're faced with this amount of money and these problems and these people that you have to help try to solve it. Any reactions? You all are looking at me like, oh, I hate her right now. But she's right. Any thoughts on any of these questions? Not just the last one. We have a hand here.
I guess I lower my standards sometimes.
Say more, please.
So we just had the conversation about Thanksgiving dinner. My brother's coming for dessert. Optimally, the pies will be baked by me. But actually, there are also a lot of good bakeries in Buffalo. So while I want to be able to bake all the pies, Tuesday will determine whether or not that actually happens or they're bought. The bakery pies will probably be better, so the family may prefer them. But my standard for myself is that I would make them. But I may lower my standard for myself.
Yeah.
Everyone at the table may not actually care. And if they don't eat the pie, then I'm going to be mad because I made it. So
Exactly.
I may lower the standard because I can't do it all.
Yes, very good example of your personal life, understanding your capacity. And then what's important at the end of the day, that people are together, that your family's here, you're celebrating together, not that I made these pies from scratch, right? Yes. Your family's all together eating the pie. That's what's most important. Yes. We have a hand here.
Hi. That third question stands out for me because I've been navigating it as a mom. Because I create a list of what I'm going to accomplish, and there must be time at the end of the day for me to rest, right? And if I am not getting through my list, then I'm a much, they have told me that I'm moody, right? Because we have open, honest conversations, but I think because I have set unrealistic goals for, in this case, a day or an evening after school and activities, it changes who I am and what I bring into the space of our home and how we interact and whether or not we're laughing or if I'm just spouting out directions and commands, right? So I think I am working through acknowledging that I cannot accomplish it all. So maybe I don't put up the laundry tonight, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But in my mind, it's like it has to be done today. So yeah, just acknowledging it allows you to show up differently, and you bring something different into the space, because when you feel like you're not accomplishing what you set out to accomplish, you may take it out on yourself, or you may bring it into the space and take it out on others.
Thank you so much. And the whole time I'm listening to your example, I'm also thinking about the work parallel too, right? Like, unrealistic goals. Oh, that's rough, but true. We set unrealistic goals all the time. And that's not necessarily to say you can't have goals and be ambitious. And especially in your line of work, your goals are around feeding people, right? It's not just an unrealistic metric you're trying to meet. You're trying to meet basic human needs. But what do you actually have capacity to do? You can't feed everybody. That's hard. That's a hard truth, right? Because if you try, you're showing up differently. You're actually not bringing the best out of yourself and the people around you. And it creates a culture of, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but things like angst and overwhelm and anxiety. And no one can really function well from that mindset either. So we have to start off with understanding that you actually deserve rest. And a lot of people, one of the biggest barriers to rest that most therapists have reported over the last few years is people don't believe they deserve it. I haven't met all my goals on my to-do list. Our nonprofit did not reach enough people. Therefore, I don't deserve to rest yet because we didn't do all the things we're supposed to do. But as Bishop Hershey says in her book, says, release the shame you feel when resting because it does not belong to you. And we're going to unpack that in a second, but I want to hear from you first. Can we have a mic here, please?
What about the situation where other people are dependent on what you're doing? So, for example, if you're in any sort of leadership role, for example, I am, you're expected to be responsible for all the grants, figuring out the grant requirements. There's deadlines involved. And my staff, you know, they have to follow these important deadlines. And it's not just about me. It's not really about shame. It's more about everyone that I'm serving and everyone that I'm working with. So there are things that I don't necessarily have control over in terms of external requirements and those sort of things. So I'm just wondering what your perspective is on that.
So many. The main one being, it still doesn't change the fact that if you're not well rested, the things won't get done. So yes, there is a lot that you're responsible for, which makes me imagine about workload capacity and the capacity of you and your staff. But being transparent, I believe someone around here said it earlier, like, can we be transparent about what is demanded of us and what resources we have to meet those demands? And if they're not in alignment, then now we have to think about our strategy differently. And we have to think about how rest can fit into it so we can actually make more mental clarity and emotional capacity to meet the needs that we can meet. I hope that answers your question. It's not a good answer. It's an honest answer, but it's not the answer. But I want to make sure that one of the things you take away from this conversation is that you have to affirm for yourself and for your staff that they deserve to rest, period, whether or not you meet all your goals or not. And you might need to write it down that you deserve rest. I have these sticky notes on my mirror every morning because I'm a working mom too of a 16-month-old, and she's lovely, but I'm tired a lot. And so I have to write down, like, it's okay to take that nap today and not wash the dishes or put the clothes away. And also in my work life, it's okay that I only had one keynote this month and not 10. Like, that's okay too. So do you actually believe you deserve to rest? Can you write down a rest affirmation for yourself? And what would it feel like to practice an embodied rest? When she mentioned yoga nidra earlier, I was like, great, someone knows what this looks like. But what would it look like to practice embodied rest right now? So we're going to take a moment to do that. If you feel not comfortable or uncomfortable, but right at that edge is where we can learn. So I'll invite you to participate right at that level where you feel like you're learning. If you are sitting down, if you could put both feet firmly on the ground, try to sit up a little. Adjust yourselves in your seat as needed. If you have anything in your hands, you might want to put them down. Rest your hands on your lap. Might want to roll out your shoulders, roll your neck a little bit. If you feel comfortable, or not comfortable, but if you feel safe, feel free to close your eyes. And just start taking some really deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. If you do that one more time, another deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Just settle into this moment. I'm going to say a few rest affirmations out loud to you while you're in a more rested state of mind. If thoughts do come into your mind, feel free to let them come in and allow them to exit. It's not about emptying your mind, it's more about feeling present in your body. It's okay to rest. You need to slow down. Your body welcomes rest. Rest is important. Your favorite self is your rested self. Release the shame you feel when resting. It does not belong to you. I deserve rest because I'm alive. I deserve rest because I'm worthy of rest. Resting is not laziness. Resting helps me be a better person. Resting helps me lead from a place of wholeness. Resting helps others learn how to show up as their best self. I deserve rest. And slowly start to wiggle your fingers and your toes. Roll your shoulders out and slowly open your eyes. You may want to shake a little bit our bodies when we've rested, even for a brief moment. The nerves need a way of exiting. So feel free to stretch and move as you need. And think about what's one thing you can do today that will help you experience more rest, either for the rest of the summit or later tonight. One thing I try to do at night is to write down everything that's on my brain before I go to bed. Just get it out so I can actually sleep. It's everything from a grocery list to a how I'm feeling right now to just words, blah, 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 just whatever. But what's one thing you can put into practice today that help you experience more rest? And now we're going to shift over to talking about recovery practices. And these are things that are going to expand beyond you to your team. And when we think about recovery, I want to quickly share my story of how I transitioned out of academia into working for myself. And it really was a quintessential burnout story. But unlike what most people think burnout looks like, my burnout looked amazing on paper. I had just received a several $million grant from the NIH. I had published, 3 papers in top journals. I was writing for HBR. I'm doing great. I got a teaching award. It's wonderful. I hated my life. I woke up every day miserable and sad and confused. This was everything I had ever worked for. I'm at the top of my game. Why am I not feeling all the things, all the success? And I remember sitting in a meeting, a virtual meeting, and I felt my body start to respond in a way that I'd never felt before. Shaking. I felt myself about to cry. And I couldn't understand it. I was like, what's happening? And my inbox was going off. I got maybe 5 emails in a row, and each one made a ping, 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 ping. Every ping, my heart I had to interrupt the person talking. I said, I'm so sorry, I can't do this right now. And I got off and I walked outside for about 20 minutes in the cold, no jacket, sweating, crying, confused. What's going on? I was burning out. That was my burnout moment. And I heard my inner child voice sort of tug my shirt and say, just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's good for you. I said, whoa, whoa, what was that? And it's like, yeah, I said, she like repeated herself. I said, just because you're good at something does not mean it is good for you. So I had to think about, well, who am I in this moment unless I am this professor that I had worked to become for so many years? Who am I without the doing? And what I didn't realize is that I was beginning my recovery from burnout in that moment, because I had to figure out how to define myself beyond what I do. Because when what I am working on is no longer working for me, then that means I have to figure out another way of being. And that is how I define recovery. It's this process where we're actually trying to restore ourselves and return ourselves back to wholeness. I do believe when we're born and we're little, especially if we were nurtured in environments that encourage this, we used to be full of wonder and play, and it didn't matter if someone else didn't like what I was wearing. I liked what I was wearing. I liked what I was coloring. So how can we return ourselves back to that person that we actually liked and liked who we were? And we could do that through a couple things, through these recovery practices where we are adjusting how we live, how we work, how we breathe, and how we connect with others. And that will help bring us back to wholeness. So my focus has always been on organizations and recovery there, but of course recovery happens in other phases of life too. But I first want us to think about different ways that we might recover at work. What does recovery at work look like during your workday? Anyone have an idea? I'll give you grace because post-lunch, but yeah, okay, thank you. I know it's post-lunch, so I will give you grace.
I would say one practice that I have that I actually wrote down as my rest affirmation and how I plan to re-engage. I appreciate all of the prompting. I used to have, or I do have on my Garmin, a little timer that goes off maybe twice or so a day that literally just says take a breath.
Yeah.
And it is a physical reminder when one of the zzz, it's not a notification that's an email that's asking me to do something.
Mm-hmm.
It's telling me to do the opposite. And I got to a point where I started to ignore those. And I think this conversation really allowed me to reflect and go back and actually probably re-engage. And when my watch is telling me your heart rate's up, your VO2 levels are a little bit down, you may need to take a step away, breathe, and come back to the work with more mental clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. Micro breaks. Micro breaks are huge. Thank you so much for sharing that very tangible example too. So this research study was done with several companies, I think Microsoft, Google, and they were tracking people's wearable devices throughout the day. And these companies were notorious for having back-to-back meetings that we go from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next. The first chart at the top shows people's stress levels. And what they noticed is that it never went down. If your stress was high, it kind of stayed high throughout the day, and then you sort of crash at the end and sleep, but a very non-restorative sleep, more like I'm just sheerly exhausted. But when you built in a little break, whether it was 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, your stress levels actually reset, and it helped your heart, your blood pressure, everything had this little rhythm and flow. So something very simple like a micro break can help restore you at work, reminding you to take a breath break. These are other working conditions that researchers have found over the years that actually help when you need recovery at work. Giving people control over where they work and even when they work. So this was the whole remote versus in-person research, but also for people who prefer to work at night versus those who prefer to work during the day. Like, how is that possible? Can we accommodate people's natural biurnal rhythms? The other one is having a low availability culture. I don't have email on my phone. I can't. I need to be disconnected. Is that okay for your staff to not be on call 24/7? For some forms of work, maybe not. There's a life or death situation. For most forms of work, though, it's not a life or death situation. So can that thing wait till the next day, right? Or the weekend? Can people actually not be on all the time? one of the biggest predictors, two of the biggest predictors of people feeling like they can recover at work and restore themselves back to an optimal state of being was their leaders. Does my leader have the emotional intelligence and emotional capacity to support me? And our leaders actually role modeling micro breaks and behaviors that shows they care about rest and recovery. Those are huge. What stands in the way of you all, I know, are as leaders, what stands in the way of you having emotional support for your staff or being able to role model that behavior? Yes, please.
So I'm the executive director of a small organization, and when I started, I was the only staff person.
Yeah.
And now I have 4 year-round staff who report to me. But one of the things that I found as a really big barrier was my lack of peer relationships. I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about the work stresses that I was facing without feeling like I was dumping on somebody that I was also responsible for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great point. So it's like, how can I emotionally support you when I need someone to emotionally support me? Yes. So I think you mentioned earlier, like having a support system around you, that form of rest is necessary for you to show up well for your staff. Very good. Anyone else? Yes, please. Katie. Here. Thank you.
So I'm the executive director at Westside Community Services in Buffalo, and I take rest very seriously. I love resting. I love setting boundaries. I'm going on vacation a couple days, and so, but I have this amazing staff who, despite all of my modeling, all of my empathy, compassion, open door policy for them, will not rest. How does that what I can only do so much. So how can we help others help themselves?
Well, I think you have some reactions here. I'd love to hear what they think too. I think we have a reaction right here, Katie, and I don't know if other folks also want to chime in, but I think people,
Real fast. Our organization, similar issue. We take collective rest at IMP. So the week of the 4th of July, the entire org is closed. No one can be reached. No one is emailing each other because no one should be emailing each other. Not just one person's out while the whole office is still working. And we do a very similar collective rest around the winter holiday season. So org-wide rest seems to work really well because it's really difficult to make certain people stop when they feel like everybody else is on, so therefore I should be too. That pressure is taken off when everybody's at rest.
Any other? Yes, here. Yeah. I had a similar thought, but yes, very nice.
Hi, Rachel Bonsignor, Liftoff, Western New York. I actually had a question because for many of us in the room, we may have a hybrid or a remote work situation. Yeah. And so how would you go about inviting colleagues and team members in that positive role modeling to share their rest when you don't see each other all that often?
Yeah.
So for me, how would I say, I'm going to go walk the dog for a half an hour at 11 because I don't have a meeting, to show that role modeling, but then also understanding and appreciating that the work happens because you're working in a hybrid setting. Yeah. It's hard to visibly see that sometimes.
Absolutely. So to bring it back to, this collective, how do you show and help the team to embody it themselves? I like the org-wide. So that's a great example of when you build in this culture and rhythm of rest, that can help normalize for everyone. We can also use the tools that are available to us. Is your calendar open for everyone at your organization to see? And if it is, do you put in, oh, Rachel's resting right now. Oh, Rachel's taking a break right now. Like break. If they see that on your calendars, then they start thinking, maybe I can take a break too. You can also implement things, and we're going to talk about this in a second. Do you implement breaks after meetings? Or do you even start meetings with a check-in of how are you doing, right? It's like those are ways that you can start to model it regardless of what kind of environment that you're in, but also build it in for them to give them the language and the tools to figure out this is how you build in the breaks visually and structurally into your day, but also how we build it into everyday meeting culture, everyday work culture. Yeah, does that answer your question? Awesome. So there's also, I want to think about recovery after work. And a lot of my research focuses on this element of how people recover if they ever take time away from work. And the biggest barrier that I have found in my work with working with organizations or individuals is psychological detachment. Who has an idea of what this means? Psychological detachment. Great, I'm still teaching. This is wonderful. This is when I am able to fully disconnect from work and not just being physically tethered to it or even checking emails, but actually my brain. Am I done thinking about work after it's over? This is a bit challenging to do, especially if you love your job or if your job is demanding. It's okay to quote unquote think about it all the time, right? Not so much. People who are unable to psychologically detach from work don't actually recover when they're on vacation, because the whole time they're on vacation, they're thinking about work, right? And psychological detachment is not just an individual failing. It can actually be supported through structural changes, things like not allowing emails after a certain time of day, or when someone is on vacation and making it clear that whatever they're working on is still being worked on, that they don't have to come back to hundreds of emails and tasks. They get to come back and ease into the work after vacation, after a company-wide closing. So these are different practices you can put in the play. And in this research here, I was asking people what works best for short-term workplace recovery. Of course, the one that was 100% the biggest predictor was exercise. So they said, okay, exercise is a given. But outside of exercise, what else actually helps people recover after work? Reading for pleasure was the highest one, whether you're reading for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just reading for pleasure is really high. So is listening to music. It says drinking tea and coffee, but I think what they actually mean is savoring your drinks. Does anyone know what I mean when I say savor your drink? Yeah, like slow down, taste it. Can you actually taste the beans and where it's from with your coffee? Being exposed to nature, taking a walk, even playing video games. The only one that had the negative impact, as you can imagine, was scrolling on your smartphones. These devices really are designed to not help us be well. So sad, because it's right here, burning a hole in my pocket. But those are the things that tends to help best when it comes to that psychological detachment. Like, how can I actually stop thinking about work? Even if it's for 10 minutes. Those things are better to help reset your bodies and your minds and prepare for work. So now it's time for you to get to work at your tables. You're going to discuss what recovery strategies you can put into place for you and your teams when they are feeling the following as a collective. So when there's a sense of overwhelm, emotional exhaustion, mental fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, uncertainty, and angst. Does anyone need me to define one of these emotions? Or do they seem pretty clear? Angst. Angst is a sense of, angst has been spiking this in 2025, a sense of existential dread of what's going on, and you can't quite pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. It's just like, I just feel dread about work specifically.
Between that and anxiety.
Yes, this is a good point. Anxiety is more the physical manifestation of the dread, where I'm feeling anxious and therefore I can't breathe. I can't, like, it's having that, I can't do the things. Whereas angst is just like a languishing feeling. Like, I just have this sense of angst over me. Whereas anxiety is like, I can't do anything because of how I feel, if that makes sense. Any other emotion clarification? Do you all kind of know what this looks like when your team is experiencing this? Some of these? Awesome. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Sorry, we're a little overtime. 5 minutes to talk about this at your table. What is a practice or policy you could put into place to help people recover when they're experiencing these things? I may or may not walk around and listen. No pressure. I know I'm a teacher. I can't help it. Okay. I hate to do this because I love the generative conversation. But I'd love to bring us back together so we can start to source some ideas that you all have undoubtedly come up with. So would one table like to share their thoughts on one of these emotions? Like, what are some activities or practices and policies you can put into place to help when your team is feeling a collective sense of one of these emotions? Any table want to volunteer? Yes, please.
So we're going to go with overwhelmed. We said that if you make a list and then start to break it down, then it won't be so overwhelming, and then you can see where you can take things off of your plate.
Oh, very nice. Awesome. Thank you. We have a hand back there.
So we were talking a lot about PTO. We were talking a lot about PTO, and not 100%. I would say overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted of getting rid of the line in your out of the office responses that say you'll get back to them when you're back in the office. I have a staff person on parental leave, and I told them, I was just like, just say email me again in February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very nice. Yes, we have another emotion. Yes, let's hear from here.
This is, I think, an extension of the one that was just talked about, but Melinda and I were speaking about how there's a policy that you don't receive emails while you're off. So that's both weekends, nights, PTO. So I have a boss who saves all of those in draft, and then when you're back in the office, you get all of those, which is nice. But then you start having this back to work anxiety of like, oh man, I'm going to walk into like 50 emails when I get back. So there's a little bit of balance, but I appreciate that when I'm out of the office, I never get a ding on my phone for an email internally because we don't send them. Yeah.
Interesting dilemma. Yeah. Another one. I think we have a hand here, and yes, those two. Yeah.
I think a lot of our conversation revolved around putting barriers on technology.
Okay.
And giving yourself space. I think it could be several of these. The organization I work at, everyone has laptops, and everyone has the habit where they bring their laptops to every meeting. So you're constantly engaged. So I've started, at least just with my immediate team, to like say, let's not bring our laptops to this meeting. So we're present in the moment and we're having a conversation, and we're not distracted with, oh, let me look this up, or oh, I just got this email. So it's creating those spaces for yourself where you're letting the technology help you rest and recover, and not being something that's going to continually stimulate you.
Absolutely. It's a great idea. I think we had a hand back there, and then we'll come here.
So I'm Tara Burgess with EPIC, Every Person Influences Children in Buffalo, and we start our leadership team meetings with emotional check-ins.
Yeah.
What's going on, what's happening in your life that you've brought with you that you can't get rid of, that we can't move forward until you get rid of that or you check that at the door. And a lot of times, particularly if we're talking about, thinking about funding and things like that, we'll ask the questions right up front. What is it that you're worried about? So, thinking about like, what are we doing with staffing, or put those questions right up in the front so we know here's the things that are weighing over your head, and we'll answer those right up front, and then we'll get to the rest of the stuff so that you're not thinking about, are we cutting staff because we didn't get that grant, right? I don't want that flavoring everything that we do for the next 90 minutes. So let's talk about that one first, put that to bed, and then we can move forward.
Okay. Prioritization. Here. Here, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, sorry.
Blessings, everyone. Reverend Denise, Urban Christian Ministries, Buffalo, New York. So for the first half of the list, what we do is when people create their quarterly work plan, they have to have a self-sustaining goal in that work plan.
Very nice.
Right? And to take it a step further, they have to calendar that. So I have to see where they're actively doing the thing that they put in their work plan to do to take care of themselves. And then for the second or the bottom part of the list, so we do organizational rest. So we have times where we're closed every year, where no one's expected to work. But what I do is I intentionally build in admin days when we come back so that they have time to address those emails, those phone calls, the things that are waiting for them, so that we're not going right back into programming and trying to do that at the same time, but they get time to do that.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Let's get one more. Here. Sorry. Thank you, Kate.
Hi, I'm Emma Timblin. I'm from Healthy Community Alliance, and I recently just started there as Director of Operations and Growth. And so we started talking about overwhelm, and one of the things that really hit home for me was they have all of these items with this new position they've created that they want me to do, and so really prioritizing that through a risk assessment to be like, we can do these items right now, and these ones can wait for later. But also checking in with your superiors or checking in with your staff on priorities. Like, I'm overextended, like having the trust to bring that up, and then also promoting a culture of trust to be able to delegate some things out, making sure that we're dispersing everybody's capacity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Here's some of the things that I've found from my research. Oh, we did have one more hand. I'm sorry. I didn't see you until I turned my back.
Hi, my name is Geraldine from Girl Scouts of Western New York. I think one of the things that we do on our team that's very helpful is blocking time for deep work. And we know within our team, if you see that on someone's calendar, that's a no interrupt zone. Yeah. And it provides the time, at least for me, to work on my goals and the stuff that's important, because, I could certainly do email and fight fires all day and not ever get the thing done. So that's something we've done on our, it's imperfect, but it is certainly something that has helped all of us. And just within my team, it's sacred space. We don't bother anybody if you see that on their calendar.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so this is from some of the research that me and several other colleagues have done that we found helps to alleviate some of these collective experiences that people have at work. A lot of what you all have shared too makes sense for your unique organization, so feel free to take this list with a grain of salt and then to implement it as you see fit. But creating space and capacity is essentially the goal of this list. It's like, in order for people to name and acknowledge that they feel overwhelmed, exhausted, brain fog, there has to be an element of trust at the organization. There also has to be flexibility for you to accommodate the needs for people to have these emotions, process them, and be able to work through them. Of course, you don't want to have a culture where these things are normalized, but you have to imagine, like, when and how are we seeing spikes in mental fatigue? Is it after we've had a marathon of meetings, after everyone had to prep for the board meeting? Like, when are these seasons of needs of recovery, and how do we build that in, right? Maybe that means you don't have day-long meetings. Maybe you break that up into several days. I know it's harder for people to schedule, but it might be better for people's mental health to have more breaks and time in between. So building in a rotating PTO schedule was one example that I was thinking of too, when you mentioned earlier, Crystal, that your team just does not rest. It's like, how do you build in and implement and normalize a culture where you're expected to take PTO on a regular basis and rotate that into your everyday work? The very last one around angst is this existential dread. One of the works that I developed in grad school, and a lot of people at the University of Michigan have helped to pioneer, is around job crafting. Is anyone familiar with job crafting? It's a little bit more than just saying this is what I want to do at my job or creating a job application, but it's thinking about you're in the moment of your work right now, and what about your job brings you meaning? What about it is aligned with your values, either for your individual job or for your organization? And if those things are off, like you can't actually identify how what you're doing on a day-to-day basis reflects those values, then it's time to reimagine your work. Some organizations engage in quarterly job crafting, where they look at what did we do for the last quarter and how is that aligned to our organization's mission and values? And if there's misalignment, what do we need to change? We either might need to change our organizational values. Maybe there's a new value that has emerged that's more reflective of what we do, or maybe we need to change our day-to-day so that it better reflects the values that we have. And that can sort of reduce that existential dread, because you know that the work I'm doing has meaning and has value because we're able to align it with what our organization says that we care about. Anyone have any questions or thoughts about this list or anything that anyone else has shared? Yes, please. One moment, sorry. Thank you.
This might be controversial, but I raised a family and worked full time, and in the old way when we didn't have cell phones with screens and creative work policies. So there wasn't working after hours.
Mm-hmm.
You left your computer, your work at the office, but as a result, I had to take more time off because I had to miss more work because I had things to do with the family. And I think that a lot of people really appreciate flexible work hours, where you can make up time later because you had to take off to go to your kid's thing, or this idea of maturely determining for yourself what you need to do in a day. I would hate to see that become unpopular or like impossible because we're so concerned about not doing after hours work. So
Yeah.
I struggle with that concept a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between non-availability and flexible work, right?
Mhm.
So flexible work is, do people have the freedom to decide when they work and when they get things done? For some people, that might be 10 o'clock at night. My brain is firing, and this is when I'd
Mhm.
run to respond to emails. But is that okay that I don't respond to your email until
Yeah, you
9
have to
o'clock
have
the
that,
next
that
day?
understanding for
Right,
sure.
right. And so I think that's what we mean by the no after work availability. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
expecting anything
Right.
of you, but if your best work is done after work, then feel free to do that.
Yeah.
Does that
yeah.
help to?
Yeah, we have to find that balance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's unique, right, for each organization and for each person, too. And that's what we mean by flexible work. It is more than just, are you working at home or not, but are we allowing people to flex when they do their best work? One of the things we have done as a society is assume everyone's a morning person. And so 9 to 5 has become so normalized. Somehow back in the day, they killed off, or they made all the people who were night owls submit to the new day workforce. My poor husband, he is so a night owl, and I feel for him when he has 9 a.m. meetings. I'm a morning person, so I'm so energized because it's almost my bedtime at like 4. So I'm so excited to do things during the day. But for people whose natural bodies are more alert at night, this is quite challenging. And so we do have to be more creative in how we're reimagining work. Shout out to her. She's amazing, like for doing that while she was walking away. She doesn't even realize I'm talking about her. But yes, you're amazing. But yeah, so when we think about rest and recovery and sustaining ourselves, that creativity piece, right? Like, how do we think about the people who want to work at night? How do we think about people who don't mind sending that email later? These are things you start thinking about when you put rest and recovery at the center of your strategy, not just we need to get work done and we need to get done now. So think about which recovery strategy you want to commit to this week for you and your team. Write that down. Take that back with you. And let's talk about the collective power of joy, and then reimagine the sector, and all that in 15 minutes. All right, so joy is quite hard to define, but what we have seen over the years is that it's more than just a feeling. It's actually a perspective and a mindset and a framework that we can develop that decides how we want to live our life. And if you need an example of what joy looks like in real life and how it's not tied to an emotion, look at Black women post this 2024 election. Oh my God, I've never seen a more joyful group that was like, we voted how we wanted to vote, it ended up how it ended up, and we are going to learn line dances and chill. Like, I've never seen a more joyful group, right? And I was like, that is a clear example of joy. It's not necessarily determined by the situation you're in, but it's the choice that you're making, that I choose to be joyful in this moment. I choose to experience play and fun. And it's hard because times are hard right now. How can I be joyful when people are dying? How can I be joyful when funding is being cut? How can I be joyful when everything is just going on all the time? But as Toni Cade Bambara has said years ago, in order to make the revolution possible, we have to make it irresistible. People can't imagine another way of being if we're like, yeah, come work for us, come try to make a difference, it's great. No one wants to come to that. But it's like, we're over here joyful, baby. We're out here learning line dances and learning how to be great and be in community with each other. And so it's quite possible to tap into joy, even if you have to fake it for a little while and manufacture your joy. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But one of the ways that we can start tapping into joy is by thinking about things that make us feel alive. What do I mean by that when I say alive? These 4 emotions are some of the core things that make us human, as opposed to just connected to all the other living beings in the world. When's the last time you felt awe? Something made you stop and say, wow. When's the last time you felt wonder, curious, hopeful? That's when you're starting to tap into your joy. And if you can't remember the last time, then that's your homework. Go discover that thing that makes you stop and say, oh, it takes your breath away. That's when you know that you're starting to tap into your joy. And then when you find it, describe it. What does it look like? What did it feel like? What does it smell like? Ignite your whole body so that they're all wanting this thing. For me, it's Irish Spring soap. Anyone know what Irish Spring soap? Yes. My grandfather, who will be 92 on his birthday, that is the soap that he has had his whole, well, at least my whole life. And I remember going into that bathroom, playing with all my grandmother's perfumes. But that smell of that Irish Spring soap, it brings me back to that childhood me who thought my grandparents' house was the funnest place in the world. They had no toys, and we couldn't leave the yard, but it was so fun. And although my grandma has been gone almost 20 years now, when I smell Irish Spring soap, I remember those moments. I remember her face. I remember her sound or her laugh. That's joy for me, right? I can describe it. I can taste it. I can feel it. So when was the last time you felt that? You felt that experience for yourself. And when you think about that, you have to now figure out how to scale it, how to bring it to your organization. So does anyone have a response to this question? How does your organization create joy for your team and for the people you serve? Is that a goal? We want this to feel joyful. When's the last time, or how does they do that? Any responses? Yes. Angela has an example. Noah, I think, is coming. Oh, Noah's coming, yeah. We're recording it, so we'll make sure we pick you all up. Yeah, thank you.
This is not something that everybody can do, but at the end of every year, we have a gala, and we actually celebrate our previous year, and we invite our clients to join us, and if they feel comfortable, share their stories. Obviously, not everybody can, but we want as many as possible to join us.
Yeah, good. Party celebration. I think over here earlier, they also talked about having the holiday parties where we're just playing and having fun. How else are your organizations creating joy? Yes.
We are all remote and distanced.
Yeah.
So there's an hour and a half distance between me and, but we meet together and we eat good food when we're together oftentimes, or have good coffee. We try new places in Buffalo, and she comes here to explore that together. And also we have some really hilarious inside jokes that give us joy in between moments of frustration, which is great.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that. And part of, if you're struggling to think about what this is for your organization, here's another level down question that you can ask yourself. Not only what are we doing, but do we know why it sparks joy? Why does this activity, a joyful activity for the people we serve or for our team? Is there a value or a need that this activity is reflecting? If one of our values is community, then how are we bringing that through the work that we do, through the activities that we're doing together? And then how can you make joy more present in your workplace? That might be pictures, that might be certain music that's playing, it could be the food that you serve, the coffee that's available, right? How do you make it more palatable? And again, think about those senses. And oftentimes, again, people think joy might be this very naive thing, how can we feel joyful in this moment? You can start to think about joy as a response to the world, that this world requires us to be joyful. Otherwise, we'd be complacent in how things are going. If we are not okay with how things are going right now, then choosing to experience joy is the response to it. And it's how we can make it more, make it the world that we want it to be. So here are some examples on how you can sustain a joyful culture at work. One way is to ritualize joy in community. So I remember talking with a company before that was we love celebrating birthdays. That's great. That's a ritual because you're going to do it over and over again. So how are you celebrating and honoring each other just for being alive and being here and present? Another way is you can create opportunities for people to, what I call, develop and enact the skills that enable joy. So let me break that down a little bit. Whenever I see a butterfly, do I have time to stare at that butterfly, to look at the wings, the patterns, the texture, maybe pull out my phone and take a picture? Is there a Slack channel where I can share it with my team, right? Do I have the skills to notice, to immerse myself in the moment, and to actually share it with other people? Does your team have time for that? Do you take walking breaks if you want people to be a low-tech meeting? And then as you're walking, do you get to notice what's around you? Are you building in the time, space, and energy and tools for people to experience that on a regular basis? If not, you can check out this planner I just created called Reclaim. It'll be launching in about a week. You'll hear more about that later. And then also capture and publicly display your joy. One of the emails I shared with you was asking you to share your joy back with us. So if it was a picture, if it was a song or a moment. But what about your work environment sparks joy for other people? I'm not saying to go back and go paint all the walls and make them a different color. But maybe there's one little thing you can put up or encourage people to share in that space that will make it a more joyful culture. No, I think we have a question here. Does someone else have a question or reaction to? Feel free to raise your hand so Katie can see you and she'll come to you next.
I just wanted to say that I love nature and have taken a class in silvotherapy, and it really talks about we don't really need to go into nature to experience it, but we can bring it into the workplace. So I make a conscious decision to do that. I have a grow light in my office where I grow things that smell nice, like basil right now. And like I'll break off the basil and put it on the meeting table, and people touch it and smell it. And I love the grape tomato, the smell of tomato. So people are coming in, they're sticking their noses in my plant. And and it's like a really big sense that like people really like that.
Yes.
Some people really like that. And other people could care less. But like little things like that. Like I have a water bubbler thing. And so, you know, just trying to bring nature into my office to sort of as a role model, I guess, or just to share something that brings me joy.
Yes. I love that you share the example of living things too, because that was something that someone shared on LinkedIn, that caring for houseplants is a big way that I have experienced joy and rest. Bringing plants into the office, but then also being clear about how this is our plant and how we can all care for it together. That reminds people to engage in more creative and sensory rest, right? Like there's ways to just integrate it naturally into your space. So in the perfect world, we would have a lot of time. But what I wanted you to do at your table is to think about what it might look like to create a rested and joyful nonprofit sector and start to answer some of these questions. Who do you need to bring in to make this nonprofit sector more rested and joyful? How will you creatively steward the resources that you have been given? And how would you define success in a sector that has centering and wants to feel more rested and joyful? Pretend like you have 10 minutes. In reality, you have like 6 minutes at your tables. Not a big task at all. Just reimagining how to sustain yourselves. Okay, go for it. Thank you. So sadly, folks, we do have to move on and wrap up. In an ideal world, we would share all these things that you're discussing and write them down, but you're just going to have to make sure you're sharing them with each other following this. But the main takeaway I wanted you all to have about sustaining the ecosystem, there is a tiny equation to all of this, where the best way to sustain the ecosystem is to sustain yourselves, right? And Deloitte, not surprisingly, came up with this brilliant definition of what human sustainability is all about. And it says the degree to which an organization creates value for people as human beings. So needing rest and needing recovery acknowledges that we are human beings, that we have these most basic needs to be cared for and to have our physical, social, emotional, mental, spiritual, creative, and sensory needs met. And so as an ecosystem, to what extent are you helping people who come and interact with your organization have greater health and well-being, have stronger skills and greater employability, have good jobs, have opportunities for advancement, progress towards equity, increased belonging, and a heightened connection to purpose? Notice that most of these have nothing to do with the financial amount that you have for your organization. It is possible to sustain human beings, and by doing that, you actually sustain the ecosystem. And the best way to take this away is that a healthy and whole workforce can actually withstand uncertainty and pressure a lot more than a compassionate but undervalued workforce. So I think for too long, nonprofits have focused on pure passion as the main tool of recruiting and retaining workers. Instead, we have to think about wanting to sustain people and preserve them, not just say we care about you, but what are we doing to actually ensure that you have good health and to make sure that you are able to withstand the pressure that comes from working in a field that is quite uncertain. So what can you do as nonprofit leaders to help build this model of sustaining others so that the ecosystem itself can be sustained? So I always end by asking these 3 questions for people, and that's what is it that you want to sit with that you learned from today? What do you want to ponder and chew on a bit more? What do you want to share with someone else, either someone that was here today or someone that you wished were here? And then what is something you're going to put into practice? Those are 3 reflections and takeaways that you can have for yourself. And then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this talk too, but also if you want access to that journal, feel free to click this PowerPoint, take a picture of it as well so you can access that. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Katie because we are at time, so thank you so much.